A gunshot echoed through the silent forest. Heart racing, he thought he'd seen the last of the bear. But hours later, in the same clearing, the bear returned, not to attack but to wait. What would you do if nature confronted you with your own fear? The forest had that heavy, wet smell of pine needles after the morning rain. Fog clung to the low branches, hiding patches of the rocky ground. David, a seasoned hiker in his late 30s, had wandered off the marked trail in search of solitude and a rare photograph of the sunrise over the valley. The crunch of wet leaves under his boots was the only sound he expected, until it wasn't. A rustle nearby froze him. David's heart jumped. The unmistakable growl followed, low, cautious, but with a weight of authority only a wild predator could hold. His eyes darted to the shape moving between the trees, a massive brown bear, fur wet from the mist, muscles rippling as it stepped forward. Fear took over. Years of wilderness training couldn't quiet the adrenaline pumping in his veins. He reached for his rifle, just a precaution, he told himself, but his hands shook as he aimed. The bear stopped 30 feet away, tilting its head as if assessing him. David remembered every story he'd heard about provoked bears, and instinctively fired. The shot echoed like a crack of thunder. The bear's ears flicked, but it didn't run. Instead, it retreated slowly, eyes never leaving him. David's chest heaved. Relief? Maybe. But something gnawed at the edge of his mind. The bear had not charged. It had not attacked. He moved cautiously, thinking the encounter was over. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. What had he done? Had his fear caused unnecessary harm? Hours later, as the fog thinned and sunlight began to filter through the treetops, David set up his camera on a small clearing by the creek. He wanted to capture the golden light reflecting off the water. And that's when he saw it, motion at the treeline. The bear, intact, unharmed, slowly stepping toward him. David froze. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to ready the rifle again. But something in the bear's posture stopped him. No aggression, no rush, just calm observation. It sat down some 20 feet away, eyes locking with his, unblinking. Time seemed suspended. Questions surged in David's mind. Why is it coming back? Was it forgiving him, or testing him? The line between fear and understanding blurred. For the first time, he noticed the subtle tremor in his own hands, the guilt he hadn't let himself feel until now. The bear's gaze didn't waver. David, shaking, slowly lowered his rifle to the ground. A cold sweat ran down his spine as realization hit him. Nature was watching, waiting, and perhaps teaching him something far bigger than himself. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and pine as the man and the bear sat in a suspended moment of tension and reflection. Neither made a move, yet the forest around them felt alive, listening. If you encountered a wild animal that had every reason to be hostile, but chose patience instead, what would you do? Would you let fear guide your actions, or your conscience? As David's hands trembled and the rifle lay forgotten, the bear shifted slightly, just enough to reveal movement in the underbrush behind it. Something, or someone, was approaching, and David realized he wasn't alone in this encounter anymore. David's heart pounded in rhythm with the forest's subtle whispers. The bear remained where it was, calm, its dark eyes scanning the clearing, but the movement behind it was unmistakable. Twigs snapped, leaves rustled, and for a moment, David wondered if it was another animal. But the shape was too deliberate, too purposeful. Then he saw her. A young girl, no older than 10, stepped carefully through the underbrush. Her small backpack looked worn, her coat muddy at the hem. She froze as her eyes met David's and then, slowly, shifted to the bear. Fear flickered in her gaze, but not the kind that made her flee. Instead, she held her ground, hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. David's mind raced. Who is she? How did she get here? Is she lost? His training screamed to keep distance, but instinct urged caution tempered with compassion. He stepped forward, slowly, hands visible, speaking softly. Hey, are you okay? The girl nodded hesitantly, then whispered, He's hurt, my friend, the cub. I can't leave him. David's attention snapped back to the bear. It wasn't the massive brown that had appeared before, but a smaller cub trailing just behind the adult. Its left front paw had a raw scrape, dried blood matted in the fur. The adult had clearly not attacked, yet it had been vigilant, protective. A wave of understanding washed over David. His fear-induced shot had been unnecessary, but it hadn't broken the bond between the cub and its mother. The girl's bravery, walking into the clearing despite the danger, humbled him. She had empathy the size of the forest itself. Do you live nearby? He asked gently. I was visiting my grandmother. I found him trapped in a fallen branch. she replied, eyes welling. I didn't know what to do. The adult bear shifted, nudging the cub slightly forward as if granting permission, or approving her presence. David felt a chill run down his spine. Nature's judgment was subtle yet absolute. He realized then that the encounter was no longer about fear. It was about trust and about making the right choice when it mattered most. The forest had presented a second chance. A chance to act with compassion, to understand the boundaries of life that weren't his to control. David slowly knelt, keeping his distance, and said, "Okay, let's help him. Together." The girl's relieved nod was the first warm spark of connection he'd felt since stepping into the clearing. And yet, as he reached for his first aid kit tucked into his pack, a sudden rustle came from the treeline. Not the adult bear, not the cub, but something else. Something larger. Something watching. Have you ever faced a moment where fear told you one thing but compassion another? How do you choose in that split second? Before David could fully assess the cub's injury, a heavy shadow swept across the clearing. The adult bear stiffened, growl low in its throat. David's stomach dropped. Whatever, or whoever, was approaching was no innocent visitor. And suddenly all three, man, girl, and cub, were unsure if this forest held safety or danger. The shadow moved deliberately, brushing against the dense underbrush. David's pulse raced. He could hear the bear's low growl, a warning that reverberated deep in his chest. The cub huddled closer to its mother, trembling but still alert. The girl froze, small hands gripping David's sleeve. David squinted through the shifting fog. At first, he thought it might be another hiker, perhaps a hunter, but the weight of the movement suggested something larger, heavier. The adult bear's posture stiffened, muscles coiling like springs. Every instinct David had screamed to back away, but retreat risked exposing the girl and the cub. "Stay calm," David whispered, trying to steady his own voice. "We don't want to provoke it." The shadow resolved into a second adult bear, enormous and imposing. Its fur was darker, the shoulders broader, and its gaze locked onto the mother and cub immediately. This was no ordinary encounter. The forest was testing every being present. The mother bear stepped protectively in front of the cub, standing her ground. David felt a flicker of awe mixed with fear. The girl whispered almost to herself, "It's his father?" David's rational mind dismissed the idea. It was unlikely bears operated like humans. Yet he saw the subtle posturing, the recognition in the cub's eyes, the calm, but tense, acknowledgement between the two adults. It was a family hierarchy, a natural balance, and human fear was the only element out of place. "David, what do we do?" the girl asked, voice quivering. He swallowed hard. "We don't move. We let them decide." Minutes passed like hours. The second bear circled slowly, sniffing the air, eyes never leaving the trio in the clearing. David could see the tension radiating from the mother. Every muscle was coiled, ready to defend her cub. And yet she did not attack. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the birds silent, the wind stilled. David understood something vital in that moment. Fear could make humans act rashly, but patience, observation, and respect were the tools to coexist, even with something as formidable as a bear. The girl, noticing the cub's limp, slowly reached into her backpack and pulled out a small cloth she had used earlier. She gestured gently toward the cub, indicating she wanted to help it. The mother bear flinched slightly, growling softly, but did not step forward aggressively. It was a test of intent. David nodded approvingly, whispering to her, "Do it slowly, show him we mean no harm." As the girl moved forward, hand outstretched, the second bear finally made its decision. With a deep, resonant snort, it backed into the trees, leaving the clearing to the mother and cub. The tension in David's shoulders eased, though adrenaline still surged. And then, just as he thought the danger had passed, the forest seemed to shift again. A loud cracking sound from behind a fallen tree drew everyone's attention. Something human was approaching. Footsteps, deliberate and heavy. Someone else had entered the forest, and judging by the smell in the air, they were armed. David's heart sank. Just when he thought fear had been contained and understanding established, a new threat emerged. This time, one that didn't belong to nature but to human recklessness. If you've ever faced a moment where patience and respect kept you safe, how would you act if human danger replaced animal fear? Could you maintain calm, or would fear take over? The footsteps grew louder, closer, and David caught a glint of metal in the trees. Rifle barrels, aimed not at the bears, but at the clearing where the girl and the cub now stood. In an instant, everything he had learned about patience and respect would be tested. Not by the forest but by humans. David's stomach tightened as the glint of metal caught the early sunlight filtering through the pines. Two men emerged from the fog, rifles slung over their shoulders, boots crunching wet leaves and twigs. Their eyes scanned the clearing, stopping abruptly on the trio, David, the girl, and the bear family. "Hey!" one shouted, voice sharp, commanding. "Step away from the cub." The mother bear immediately stiffened, growling low and resonant. Her cub huddled closer, ears back, trembling but still watching David and the girl for guidance. The second bear, partially hidden behind the trees, let out a warning snort, a reminder that this was no longer a simple human-animal encounter. It was a test of intentions and understanding. David stepped forward, hands raised, trying to project calm. "They're not harming anyone. Please just step back. We don't want trouble." The men laughed nervously. "Trouble? That's a bear out here. Could kill anyone at any second." David's pulse raced. He understood their fear, it was natural, but he also knew the truth: the bears weren't aggressive. Their protective instincts were being misunderstood as hostility. And if the men acted rashly, all three lives could be at risk. "Look at them," David said, his voice firm but measured. "The cub is injured. The mother isn't attacking. We can all walk away safely if you listen and stay calm." The taller man hesitated, shifting his weight nervously. His companion, younger and less experienced, tightened his grip on the rifle. We just want to scare them off." David swallowed, aware of the weight of his next words. "You scare them and you might lose more than you think. Respect their space. If you truly care about safety, step back now." The mother bear's eyes never left the humans. Her body was tense, coiled, ready to defend, but not yet attacking. It was as if she understood David's words, trusting him to mediate between worlds that didn't naturally speak the same language. The girl, clutching David's sleeve, whispered, They don't understand." Her voice trembled. "Please, don't let them hurt him." David nodded, moving slowly toward the men, maintaining eye contact with the mother bear the entire time. Every step was measured, every word deliberate. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, a twig snapped under the younger man's boot. The mother bear growled sharply, a sound vibrating through the clearing like a drumbeat warning of the danger of crossing boundaries. David froze, praying that reason would prevail. To his relief, the taller man raised a hand, signaling his companion to stay calm. All right, we'll back off," he muttered, keeping his eyes on the bear. Slowly, deliberately, the men retreated a few steps. The second bear, still partially hidden, let out a deep snort before vanishing into the fog, leaving the clearing quiet once again, save for the rhythmic sound of David's heavy breathing. David knelt beside the cub, gently lifting its injured paw. The girl helped, offering a small cloth to clean the wound. The mother bear watched intently but relaxed slightly, understanding that these humans had chosen respect over fear. And in that suspended moment, David realized the profound lesson the forest had delivered. Courage wasn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it was about restraint, patience, and understanding, the moral choices humans often fail to see in the wild. David had just begun to feel relief when the forest fell silent, unnaturally so. Then, a distant roar echoed through the valley, louder and more urgent than any growl they had heard before. The bears froze, the girl gasped, and David realized with a cold knot in his stomach, the encounter wasn't over. Something, or someone, was coming, and this time, it wouldn't wait for patience or moral reasoning. When fear clouds judgment, how do you decide whether to act or step back? Can true courage sometimes mean restraint rather than action? The roar rolled through the forest like a distant drumbeat, shaking loose droplets from the moss-laden branches. David's head snapped toward the sound. The adult bear stiffened immediately, ears erect, muscles taut, eyes scanning the horizon. The cub whined softly, leaning into its mother's side. David instinctively stepped closer to the girl. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his voice low but firm. His heart hammered as adrenaline surged through him. This was no ordinary bear, it wasn't part of the small family, something far larger, far more dangerous, was approaching. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Birds froze mid-flight, and even the wind dropped, as if nature itself anticipated the confrontation. David realized that all the lessons of fear, patience, and respect were about to be tested in an instant. From the dense fog ahead, a massive shadow emerged, a solitary male bear, larger and more powerful than the mother, eyes fixed on the clearing with primal intent. Its roar echoed again, and the mother bear responded with a low, defensive growl, positioning herself between the cub and the approaching giant. David's mind raced. Flight was impossible without endangering the girl and the cub. He glanced at her, eyes wide, trembling yet resolute. This was a moment that demanded action but not recklessness. The male bear advanced cautiously, sniffing the air, but his eyes were set firmly on the cub. David realized instinctively, this was the natural hierarchy of the forest. The intruder was asserting dominance, but the mother bear's defensive stance, paired with her calm authority, was buying them time. David spoke softly to the girl, "Do not make sudden movements. Let them communicate without interference." He could feel the tension vibrating in the air, the fine line between survival and catastrophe. The girl, understanding, crouched lower, offering a piece of cloth to the cub for comfort. The cub looked to her, then to its mother, and finally hesitated in front of the approaching male. The mother growled again, a warning but this time less aggressive, a measured tone that said, "Stand your ground, but we can resolve this without violence." David's gaze shifted to the male bear. It paused, sniffed the air, and for a tense heartbeat, the forest held its breath. Then, with a low rumble, it circled once, twice, before retreating into the fog. Its intent had been communicated, dominance established. The mother bear relaxed slightly, though her eyes never left the retreating figure. David exhaled slowly, his body trembling with relief. The girl hugged the cub close, whispering soothing words. He realized that patience, respect, and calm had prevented an encounter that could easily have turned deadly. Nature had provided a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. Courage is not always in confrontation. It is in understanding, restraint, and empathy. But just as he began to feel relief, the forest's edge rustled again, this time with human movement. A group of hikers, unaware of the prior events, were stepping into the clearing. Rifles were nowhere in sight, but cameras and phones were raised, ready to capture danger for likes and attention, ignorant of the delicate balance unfolding before them. Have you ever witnessed a situation where patience and understanding averted disaster? How would you act if others threatened that balance unknowingly? David thought the forest had taught its lesson, until the girl pointed toward a tree line beyond the clearing. Shadows moved differently this time, faster, deliberate, and coordinated. Another presence was approaching, not a bear, not a single human, but a force that threatened to disrupt the fragile trust he had fought to maintain. The shadows moving along the tree line weren't just hikers or casual wanderers. David squinted, heart pounding, trying to make sense of the approaching figures. They moved with purpose, deliberate and quick, disrupting the forest floor with each step. Something in their rhythm set David on edge. This was no innocent intrusion. The mother bear growled low, a deep vibration that resonated in David's chest. Her cub pressed closer, sensing the escalating tension. David instinctively positioned himself between the girl and the bear, realizing that his own fear could not dictate their next moves. This was about calm, observation, and trust, between human and animal. The approaching force emerged into the clearing finally, revealing 3 hikers, young men with camera equipment and backpacks. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity and excitement. They had no weapons, but their presence was disruptive enough. The bears stiffened, the mother lowering herself slightly to appear larger, the cub peeking from behind her leg. David raised a hand to halt the humans, speaking clearly and firmly. "Stop. Don't come closer. You can watch but don't move forward. Understand this. The cub is injured and the mother will protect him if she feels threatened." One of the men laughed nervously. "It's just a bear family. We're fine. We're just here for photos." The girl whispered, "They don't understand, they might scare him." Her fingers gripped David's sleeve tightly. David nodded, turning to her. "Then we teach them slowly. Respect. Space. Patience." He took a slow step forward, his hands visible, signaling calm. The mother bear's eyes followed him, alert but trusting his judgment. The male bear from earlier was gone, but the lesson had been etched into every muscle of the animals: caution, hierarchy, and protective instincts. David gestured to the humans to stand still. "Don't make sudden moves. The cub is hurt. Any aggressive movement will provoke the mother, and that's a danger none of us want." The humans froze, cameras lowered slightly. The tension in the clearing was palpable, the delicate balance between fear, respect, and understanding hanging by a thread. The girl took a careful step toward the cub, holding out a small cloth. The mother bear growled softly, a warning yet allowed it. David mirrored her patience, guiding the humans with subtle gestures. "Watch. Learn. Don't intervene unless necessary." Minutes passed. The cub accepted the care, trembling but calm. The mother bear relaxed marginally, the forest's breath steadying. David felt the moral weight of the moment. Empathy and understanding could prevent conflict, while ignorance or recklessness could ignite it. Then, just as he began to breathe, a sharp crack echoed from deeper in the forest. Something moved faster than any hiker, a shadow larger than the cub's mother, charging through the trees. The mother bear reacted instantly, growling and placing herself between the threat and her cub. The girl shrieked softly, and David realized that despite all patience, danger was now unavoidable. When faced with a situation where understanding and patience guide your actions, how do you respond if an unexpected danger arrives? Can empathy survive in moments of raw instinct? The charging shadow emerged fully from the treeline, a rogue black bear larger than any David had ever seen. Its roar reverberated across the clearing, shaking loose pine needles and sending birds screaming into the foggy sky. The mother bear sprang into action immediately, placing herself squarely between the intruder and her cub. Her growls echoed like rolling thunder, full of authority and warning. David's stomach dropped. He glanced at the girl, whose hands clutched the cub tightly, eyes wide with fear. He knew instinctively that interference from humans could escalate the confrontation. The bears were communicating in a language older than him, older than the forest itself. His role was clear: protect without provoking, guide without obstructing. The black bear advanced, teeth bared, muscles taut. The mother bear responded with measured aggression, standing tall, swiping at the air with a controlled force to assert dominance. The cub watched, trembling but staying behind its mother's legs. David whispered urgently to the girl, "Do not move. Do not make a sound. Trust them, they know what they're doing." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves became amplified. David understood the moral weight of the moment. In life, sometimes courage is measured by restraint, by letting those who understand the rules of the natural world act. The black bear lunged, but the mother bear met the charge, engaging in a controlled clash. They circled, growling, testing each other's strength, dominance, and resolve. David's pulse raced, sweat trickling down his temple, yet he remained still, guiding the girl with soft gestures. Minutes felt like hours. The rogue bear, assessing the mother's defensive strategy and the cub's presence, finally hesitated. It was no longer a mindless attack. It was a negotiation written in fur, claws, and instinct. Slowly, the black bear retreated into the fog, leaving the clearing quiet once again. David exhaled, relief washing over him like a tidal wave. The girl hugged the cub tightly, whispering soft words. The mother bear remained alert but relaxed slightly, muscles coiling and uncoiling as if releasing the tension of the confrontation. David felt a profound shift within himself. Fear had driven his first encounter. Compassion and patience had guided his second. And in the end, the forest, with its rules and instincts, had enforced its own moral law. Humans had to respect it or suffer the consequences. Just as David exhaled, believing the danger was over, he noticed movement beyond the fog. Another figure, human this time, approaching rapidly and not with curiosity. This presence carried something heavy, and David knew instinctively. The forest's fragile balance was about to face a threat no patience nor instinct could fully prepare them for. David's pulse thundered in his ears. Beyond the fog, he could see a lone man moving rapidly toward the clearing. He carried a large backpack, and something glinted at the side, unmistakably metallic. This was no casual hiker. This was someone who could change the fragile balance of trust David had painstakingly navigated. The girl pressed closer to him, whispering, "Please, don't let him hurt them." Her small hands trembled, holding the cub tightly. David's eyes scanned the clearing. Mother bear poised protectively, cub crouched behind her, and the fog swirling like a living entity. David knew he had only seconds to act. The man's approach was fast, reckless, and without respect for the natural order of the forest. David raised his hands, calling out as firmly as he could, "Stop! Don't move closer." The man hesitated just for a moment. The metallic glint revealed itself as a tripod, not a weapon. He was a wildlife documentarian, unaware of the prior encounters, rushing to capture the perfect shot. Relief flickered in David's chest, but only for a heartbeat. The mother bear didn't know the difference. Every step closer was perceived as a threat. David acted decisively. He moved forward, speaking softly but firmly. "This is not a spectacle. You are risking lives, your own, hers, his, and the cubs. Step back and watch. Respect their space." The man froze, scanning the clearing, now realizing the tension he had entered. Slowly he lowered the tripod and retreated a few steps. The forest seemed to exhale, but tension still lingered in the fog. David knelt by the cub, gently checking the wound again. The mother bear's eyes never left the intruder, muscles coiled and ready, but she allowed David's actions, trusting, understanding, patient. The girl whispered to the cub, soothing it with soft words. In that moment, David understood the profound moral lesson. The true weight of decisions is not always in action, but in knowing when restraint is the greater courage. The forest had tested him, teaching patience, empathy, and respect, not through fear alone, but through measured observation and understanding. For the first time he truly saw the connection between human and animal, the unspoken agreements, the trust built on restraint, and the moral consequences of every step taken in the wilderness. When faced with a situation where your choices can impact life, how do you measure courage? Is it in action, restraint, or understanding the natural balance? David exhaled slowly, thinking the danger had passed. But the cub whimpered suddenly, ears flicking toward the distant tree line. From the fog, another movement emerged, smaller, quicker, unpredictable. The forest's lessons weren't finished. There was one last challenge ahead, testing courage, empathy, and trust to its limit. The whimper of the cub echoed through the clearing, sharp against the soft murmur of the forest. David's eyes scanned the fog, trying to locate the source. Out of the mist darted a young fox, frightened and stumbling, its paw caught in a tangle of roots. The mother bear's gaze softened slightly, recognizing no threat in the small creature, yet her body remained coiled, protective of her cub. David exhaled, a mixture of relief and tension. "It's okay, it's just an animal," he whispered to the girl. She clutched the cub tightly, eyes wide, as the bears assessed the tiny intruder. The fox twisted free, darting toward the trees, and for a moment the clearing was silent. The mother bear nudged her cub gently, reassuring him. The cub responded with a soft nuzzle against her leg, a clear sign of trust and recognition of safety. David knelt, his hands brushing the cub's damp fur. "You did it," he murmured. The girl echoed softly, "You're safe now." The forest, as if acknowledging the peaceful resolution, seemed to relax. Mist drifted lazily through the pines, sunlight piercing through the branches, creating golden shafts across the clearing. The mother bear allowed the cub to explore briefly, sniffing at the ground, while maintaining a watchful eye on David and the girl. In that suspended, golden moment, David realized the depth of connection that had been formed. Fear, patience, empathy, and understanding had bridged the gap between species. Humanity and nature had found a fragile, fleeting balance. The documentarian remained at the edge of the clearing, lowering the camera. He nodded silently to David, a shared acknowledgement of the delicate moral lessons unfolding. The girl whispered, "Will they come back?" David smiled softly, understanding the truth. In the wild, trust is never permanent, but respect ensures survival. "Yes," he said quietly. "They'll remember you, and we'll remember them." The mother bear finally turned, stepping back into the fog, her cub following closely. David and the girl watched, hearts pounding, until both animals disappeared into the mist. The forest exhaled, returning to its quiet rhythm, leaving behind a profound understanding of life's fragile bonds. As the mother and cub disappeared into the mist, David noticed a subtle rustle further in the forest. It wasn't threatening, but it reminded him, the lessons of nature were ongoing. Every encounter, every choice held consequences, and respect, empathy, and courage were always required in equal measure. The clearing had returned to its quiet rhythm, bathed in golden light and mist, yet the echoes of the morning's events lingered in every shadow and rustling leaf. David and the girl sat together, the cub nestled safely beside them, now calm and trusting. The forest seemed to breathe again, each tree and branch a witness to the fragile harmony that had been maintained. David looked down at the cub, brushing a wet strand of fur from its eyes. "You taught me something today," he whispered. "Fear isn't always the answer. Patience, empathy, and understanding, that's what keeps us alive." The girl nodded, hugging the cub tighter. "And respect. You can't just take or control things you don't understand." A gentle breeze swept through the clearing, rustling leaves and carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. The mother bear had vanished into the fog, but her presence lingered, a reminder of the power and wisdom of the natural world. David understood then that their bond, though fleeting, had created a bridge between human and nature, fear and understanding, action and restraint. He turned to the girl. "Promise me something?" She looked up, eyes wide. "What?" "Whenever you face fear, whether in the forest, the city, or in life, remember this day. Remember what patience, courage, and empathy can do. You don't have to fight every threat. Sometimes you survive by understanding it." The girl nodded solemnly, a new maturity settling in her eyes. The cub nuzzled her, and for the first time she laughed softly, a sound mingling relief, joy, and wonder. David stood, brushing the forest debris from his clothes. He glanced once more toward the treeline, the fog shifting like a veil over secrets and lessons. Then, with a final glance at the cub and the girl, he began to walk back toward the marked trail, carrying with him the profound moral of the day: true courage lies not in dominance, but in restraint, empathy, and the ability to respect the lives of others. Even as the forest returned to its quiet state, David knew that the lessons would echo in him forever. The bears had trusted him, the girl had shown courage beyond her years, and the forest had reminded them all. Life is measured not by fear or aggression, but by the empathy, respect, and patience we extend, even when no one is watching.